In the autumn of 1850, doctors sent a 49-year-old Frenchman to Italy to die. His name was Frederic Bastiat. He had tuberculosis, and it had gone after the one thing he could least afford to lose: his voice. He had been elected to the French National Assembly 2 years earlier, and by this point, he could barely be heard across a room. He had written, somewhere in his work, that he would proclaim his principles with all the force of his lungs, which was, he admitted, not much force at all. They sent him to Pisa first, then Rome, and in those last months, coughing, exhausted, he was trying to finish a pamphlet. It had already gone badly. He had written the thing once and lost the manuscript entirely, so he wrote it again from scratch, read it back, decided it was no good, and burned it. Then he wrote it a third time. That pamphlet opens with a small scene on a street. A boy throws a rock through a baker's window. A crowd gathers, and somebody in the crowd offers the baker the standard consolation: look on the bright side. Now the glazier gets paid. Money changes hands. That broken window is good for business. Bastiat says the crowd is wrong, and then he shows you exactly why, and the whole of modern economics arguments about stimulus and disaster and jobs still runs through that one street corner. He died in Rome on Christmas Eve, 1850. The people around his bed said he murmured the same 2 words twice before he went: the truth. 96 years later, an American newspaperman took that single pamphlet, expanded it into 20-odd chapters, and published a book that has since sold more than 1 million copies and never gone out of print. His name was Henry Hazlitt. The book is Economics in One Lesson, published in 1946. Hazlitt had no economics degree. He had no degree at all. His father died when he was small. He spent part of his childhood in a Philadelphia home for fatherless boys, and when he got into the Free City College in New York, he had to walk away from it to support his widowed mother. He took a job as an office boy for $5 a week, worked out that the secretaries were making $15, and went and learned shorthand. Everything he ever knew about economics, he taught himself out of library books. And the lesson really is one sentence: when you judge any policy, you have to trace what it does, not just to the people you can see and not just today, but to everyone it touches, over the long run. That is it. Everything else in the book is that sentence, aimed at something. Go back to the baker. Say the window costs 6 francs. The glazier gets 6 francs. He is genuinely better off. He is visibly better off. And he might go spend it at the butcher, who spends it somewhere else, and you can follow that money around town all afternoon watching it do good. Now do the part nobody does. The baker was going to buy a pair of shoes. He does not buy them. He can't. The 6 francs went into glass. So somewhere in that same town there is a shoemaker who never got an order he was going to get, who never noticed, because you cannot notice a sale that did not happen. The money still circulated. It just circulated through a different door. And at the end of the day, the town has a window and no shoes, when it could have had a window and shoes. It is poorer by exactly 1 window. That is the entire fallacy. And it is not subtle once you have seen it. Hazlitt's contribution was to point out how enormous this thing gets when you scale it up. He was writing in 1946, when the rubble in Europe was still smoking, and serious people were arguing that all that destruction would be economically stimulating. New factories would replace old ones. Construction would boom. Some of them said the war itself had ended the Depression. Hazlitt's answer is that if this were true, the fastest way to get rich would be to burn your own city down, and nobody actually believes that when it is their house. You still hear it. Every hurricane season, somebody goes on television and says the rebuilding will add to growth. It will. It will also consume money and labor and steel that we're going to build something new, and the country ends up with a replaced roof where it could have had a roof plus something it did not have before. The glazier is on the news. The shoemaker never finds out he lost the sale. The same blindness runs the oldest argument in economics, which is that machines destroy jobs. In England, between 1811 and 1813, textile workers went into mills at night and smashed the frames. They were called Luddites, after a probably invented figure named Ned Ludd. They were not idiots, and they were not confused. Their trade was being wrecked in real time, and they were correct about that specific thing. Hazlitt does not deny it. He is unusually honest here. The workers a machine replaces are really thrown out, and some of them never recover. Then he shows you the other column. He cites figures for the English cotton trade before the spinning machines arrived. Something like 7,900 people in the whole industry, spinners and weavers combined. A generation later, after the machines everybody had fought, that number was in the hundreds of thousands. The reason is boring and mechanical. The machine cuts the cost of cloth. Cheaper cloth means more people can afford cloth, so they buy more of it. More cloth means more mills, more workers to run the mills, and a whole new industry of people who build and repair and sell the machines themselves. Meanwhile, everyone who buys a shirt has money left over that they now spend somewhere else, funding jobs that had no reason to exist before. None of which is any comfort at all to the man whose skill just became worthless. The gain is spread across millions of people who will never know they got it. The loss lands on a few thousand who know exactly what happened. Which is why the politics of this never gets easier, no matter how right the economics is. And it is why Hazlitt spends a whole chapter on what he calls spread the work schemes, rules that require more men on a job than the job needs. Feather bedding, restrictions on how many bricks a bricklayer may lay in a day. Every one of them is sold as job creation, and every one of them is a decision to get less done with the same effort, which is the precise definition of getting poorer. There is no shortage of work in the world. There is only ever a shortage of ways to pay for it. The middle of the book is about prices, and Hazlitt's claim is that a price is not a number. It is a message. When something gets scarce, its price rises. That rise tells every buyer to use less of it and tells every producer to go make more of it, instantly, without anyone holding a meeting. Nobody designed that. It is just what happens when millions of people trade. So when a price gets too high and a government caps it, the intention is obvious and decent. The result is that you have switched off the message while leaving the shortage in place. America ran this experiment on itself, live, on television. In August of 1971, President Nixon froze wages and prices across the country for 90 days. It was popular. Inflation was the #1 issue, and here was a president doing something about it visibly in a primetime address. The controls stayed, in phases, for years. In March of 1973, the administration put a ceiling on the retail and wholesale price of beef, pork, and lamb. In June, it froze prices again. But it did not freeze prices at the farm level, and this is where the whole thing comes apart. So, a rancher was watching the cost of feed climb while the price the packers could charge sat locked in place, which means shipping cattle to market became a way to lose money. So they stopped shipping. Poultry farmers, squeezed the same way, destroyed young chicks rather than pay to raise birds they could not sell at a profit. By that summer, slaughterhouses were laying people off, wholesalers were going under, and American supermarkets had meat counters with nothing in them. The price of beef had been successfully controlled. There was simply no beef. And the shortage did what shortages do. It handed out the meat by queue and by luck and by knowing a guy instead of by price. And the people who did best were the ones with time to stand in line and connections to work. Rent control does the same thing on a longer timescale, which is why Hazlitt hated it. Cap what a landlord may charge, and you have not created cheap apartments. You have created a permanent shortage of apartments and a very lucky group of people who got one. A price you are not allowed to pay is not a low price. It is an empty shelf. The rest of the book is the same knife, applied over and over. Tariffs. A tariff on imported steel visibly saves steel jobs, and those workers are real and photographable. What is unseen is every American manufacturer who now pays more for steel and hires fewer people, and every consumer paying more for a car, and the exporters abroad who now have fewer dollars to buy American goods with. The jobs saved get a press conference. The jobs never created get nothing. Inflation gets the same treatment. Hazlitt argues that printing money does not create wealth. It redistributes it quietly, from anyone holding savings or on a fixed income toward whoever gets the new money first. The stimulus is seen. The pensioner whose money bought less this year than last is not. Now, the fair objections. Because this book is a polemic and you should know where it stops. On several of these, Hazlitt is close to mainstream. Ask economists across the political spectrum about broad price controls, or whether hurricanes make a country richer, or whether tariffs are usually a net loss, and you will get a lot of agreement with him. On others, he is arguing one side of a live fight and does not always tell you it is a fight. The biggest is Keynes. The Keynesian case is that in a deep slump with factories idle and millions unemployed, the resources government spending uses are not being taken from anywhere because they were sitting still. The unseen alternative use does not exist. Hazlitt rejected this and later wrote an entire book attacking Keynes, but you are hearing one prosecutor, not a verdict. His minimum wage chapter has also collided with 50 years of messy empirical work that has not settled cleanly in either direction. And the book has almost nothing to say about the things markets famously handle badly, like pollution, or anything everyone benefits from and nobody wants to pay for. It is called Economics in One Lesson, and one lesson is not the whole subject. Hazlitt says so himself in the title, but the lesson holds. A dying man in Rome, on his third attempt at a pamphlet he had already lost once and burned once, worked out that the whole trick is to keep looking after the interesting part is over, to ask who else this touches, and what happens next year, and what would have existed if this money had gone somewhere else. Anyone can see the glazier. Almost nobody goes looking for the shoemaker.